Welcome to the Arts Council of York County. We're here today in the Center for the Arts with Phil Moody, talking to him about his exhibit titled The Importance of Being Here. Hello, Phil. How's it going?
I'm fine. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So you're here. Your exhibit here is titled "The Importance of Being Here," and it's a photo exhibit that consists of 3 different bodies of work. Could you explain the 3 different bodies of work?
Sure. Well, to begin with, I had this idea that since I'd photographed in other countries pretty seriously, most recently in Portugal when I've been working in the marble quarries, that I would, for this exhibition, concentrate on the region in which we live. And I began to think about the reason for not assuming that you had to be somewhere more exotic to take interesting pictures, which prevails among photographers. People think that, and a lot of artists too, especially plein air artists, that you've got to be somewhere, quote, special. Of course, you know, with students I would often take the example of, and I would describe it in quite detail because I'd been there. I'd be in North Africa, arrive on the bus and drive into the town and describe the scenes en route. And of course, everything was so different. Your senses were sharpened. So, but if the whole situation was reversed, and if you lived there and came here, of course, this would be exotic. Yeah. So the idea was that I would really think about what's important about being here and taking stock, and then also trying to do something when I made the pictures that would reflect on the qualities, the character of being here, whether it's in Rock Hill with the series which I call All Night, All Year. So over the year I've been going out late at night, early in the morning, and I've been finding locations. It's very difficult to find them during the daytime. You've really got to go at night to see what places are like, because the most unassuming locations can suddenly have qualities that, because of the light, obviously artificial light.
So that series, All Night, All Year, it focuses here in Rock Hill.
Yeah, and very strictly within the boundaries. I mean, I literally looked at the boundaries of Rock Hill, and that was my limit geographically. I would not drive beyond, for example, the intersection of Porter Road and I-77, because after that it becomes somewhere else.
Okay.
And ditto on the west side and on the north side and so on. Not that I've, like, you know, covered every street in Rock Hill. Yes. I've been over many of them, but that was the idea, was to stay within Rock Hill and look at its character at night, through my eyes.
So you would drive around Rock Hill looking for locations with inspiration, looking for inspiration from locations at night that that had interesting light, had interesting composition, interesting content.
Yeah, and on the content, you know, thinking about, well, what's Rock Hill known for? It's known for textile mills, of course, in recent history, the railway, the river. The river's not represented, but I have photographed it at night. And then it would be a matter of sort of finding you know, locations that I thought brought together some of that history. Sometimes it would literally be standing there with my camera shutter open for a long, long period to see what I could get. So there's a bit of experimentation. I wanted to see what movement looked like. So the airport picture, the Museum Road picture, which has the tank in the foreground, is a good example of that.
That's actually one of my favorite pieces in the exhibit, because these prints are so dark that sometimes from a distance you don't think there's very much information there.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you approach, especially that piece, the tank becomes alive, because at a distance you may not recognize that there's a tank. And then once you realize there's a tank in that image, you start to capture all the light trails that you've caught from planes flying by.
Yeah, and for people to know, we're talking about the National Guard Armory on Museum Road. So that tank was very iconic for me to try and make a picture of. So I spent many nights standing there with long exposures and getting pictures, but I wouldn't necessarily call them interesting. And then noticing that both with Rock Hill Airport and Charlotte Airport, at certain times of the night, this is pre-COVID, so there were a lot more planes in the air at the time, that I sort of built a picture out of it with long exposures, and trying to kind of, part of it is imagining pictures, which sounds odd with photography, but it's not necessarily jumping up and grabbing you by the throat and saying, here I am, I'm ready to have a picture made. It's finding an angle and then working it to bring out the character. So, I would distinguish between taking pictures and making pictures. I make pictures because I'm spending a lot of time, and that series, exemplifies that. So long exposures ranging between several seconds to several hours. Wow.
So moving on from that, I want to ask you about the next series, January 20th. This series is exhibited digitally in our gallery. So what are the parameters on this series? Since the first series we talked about is at night in Rock Hill, what is the parameters on the series, January 20?
Pretty tight. It's only shot on January 20th each year, and only within the congressional district of SC5.
Okay.
So
our current voting district that we're standing in right now.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's changed.
Okay.
So when I started it in 2009, it was really a celebration of this historic moment when Obama was elected. And my way of using everyday material to contrast with the importance of what's happening in Washington at the time, at the very same time. So I drove around. I didn't have this planned at all. All my plan was I was going to photograph on that day, see what I got. Several days later, I realized when I looked at the map, I'd pretty much driven a lot of SC Congressional District 5. Okay. That led me to think, I made some quite interesting pictures, and I really want to do this again next January 20th. And I've done it every year since.
So since 2009, so 11 years of driving around this congressional district and photographing places, people, and things. It's kind of, you've created with this series like a document of this congressional district, and it's tied to Inauguration Day. Is there any series or anything in the series that has come clear over the time that you've exhibited that, or time you've taken those photographs? Anything changes that you've seen?
Not really in terms of content, because beyond it being on that day within that geographic area, it's pretty wide open as to what I'm going to photograph. There's times when I'm out photographing the rest of the year, or during the Christmas parades, that I'll pass something by and I'll take note. That would really be an interesting place to go back on January 20th. And ditto certain people, like I'll meet them, like I was driving down to past Blackstock. I can't remember the number of the road. And I passed by a yard that had a whole lot of roosters in it. And I mean, it looked interesting. And we've all passed those places by. Anyway, I stopped and I talked to the guy that owned them and, told him I wanted to come back on January 20th. I think he must have wondered what on earth and why that day. And so I explained my project and he was fine. The only thing he was concerned about was the health of his roosters, that having foreigners, people come in, you can bring disease to the chickens, and so I had to present a clean bill of health, as it were. So he was fine with that. So I'll see certain things en route and then note it down in my book, so they're kind of little earmarked, organized things. Other than that, that project is wide open to just, see stuff. I mean, there's some years, to be honest, I've come back and I've thought, if I've got one picture out of this day's shooting, I'll be lucky. The light's not really been great. I haven't really been, very much inspired on the way around. And, I put it down to me. But I had an off day at the wrong time.
So one thing I'm realizing from your stories about the specific photographs is your commitment to creating that image. So you're not just showing up and catching the shot and then going and editing it. You were thinking about the shot, lining it up, waiting for the moment, returning to it so you could capture something you didn't capture last time you were there. What do you have to say about the commitment to creating the image?
Well, this of course depends. Each creative person has their own methods, and you're filtering it through your sensibilities and your thinking process. I'm not a great believer in thinking while I'm doing it. And I prefer to be totally intuitive and shut off all the intellectual process. But afterwards, then I start to impose the more intellectual, conceptual sort of things as to why they're important or why they're not. And so, there's a kind of personal method or methodology that's involved. But the making a picture also involves afterwards, really looking hard at what you've got and what you haven't got, and then assessing, because I'll shoot a lot of pictures in many of these situations, and it's got to come down to something there that was beyond what I set out to do. It's got a quality of surprise. It could be all sorts of things. The angle I shot it at, the light, and with photography, you never get a second chance. That's really tough. You think you've got a picture that you can go back and reshoot. It is never the same. And of course, you're never the same. So you're really up against a lot of internal pressure to get it right.
So this kind of leads me to your final series. There Can Be Only One Santa, the series we're standing in front of right now. Can you describe the method and process behind that work? Because seems to be a lot about capturing things in the moment.
Yeah, it very much is. Well, I began it totally accidentally, and the place I went to is in the middle of the forest, and it just was a pretty neat experience because the African American guy that was playing Santa was really into it. He was like so full of life, and I thought I got a great picture. Actually, it's the very last one in the series, and it inspired me to start thinking about going to other parades. So each year since then, I've gone to as many parades as I can cram in. And now in this case, yeah, you're right. A lot of it is just very much catching a picture in that moment. But given that I've had to drive 2 hours to get there, and I've been thinking about it all year, and then when I get there, I usually plan to be there at least an hour early so I can walk around.
So you're going to different Christmas parades around South Carolina to document them and capture or work for this series. Before you get into that, how many parades have you been to and photographed?
I've been to 81 parades.
In how many years?
Since 2009.
So 81 parades since 2009, and how many parades, Christmas parades take place in South Carolina, do you think?
I think about 150.
So you're a little over halfway documenting every Christmas parade that happens in South Carolina every year.
But I started with a disadvantage because that first year I only photographed that one, and then the next 2 years I was teaching, and a lot of parades happened at the worst time of my year for teaching, and so it really got going in, I would say, 2013, and now I have scheduled over a 3-week period, basically. So the first ones are usually a few days before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And then the last ones are almost certainly mid-December, no later than December 15th. But most of them happen on 2 weekends, of course, jammed in the middle there. So what I have to try and do is to get from one to the other on a particular Saturday and try and get either 3 or 4 parades shot in one day.
Wow. So that's a busy schedule. So and you show up to these parades, or try to show up to these parades an hour early so you can scout out locations of where you're going to shoot. And then you spend probably about 2 or 3 hours shooting or walking around?
Depends on the parade. I've been to parades where I think I was the 21st person on the street, and that's all there were. Most of the people were in the parade, and I've been to others like Rock Hill, Greenville, Charleston, Columbia, where it will last an hour and a half. And then, you know, I've got a lot. I mean, I'll walk with the parade in those cases. Yeah, as you say, I arrived there early to scout locations. Part of it is because I wanted to show you what that town looks like, even if it's one building or a corner or something, the characters. So collectively, the whole project will give you a sense of what South Carolina is like, is the aim. Given that it's got this bit of theatre happening in the street. And keep in mind that there's never in the year as many people on that street as that one day.
Yeah, that is the time of the year that almost every main street in South Carolina is activated and becomes this stage for whatever parade gets put on by that town or principality or what have you.
Which will include ROTC, it'll include church groups, businesses, the Scouts or Girl Guides. It'll include people just out there to have ridiculous fun and walk their pig. It'll have tractors with people hanging over the trailers and so on. It'll have a bunch of older ladies who call themselves oh, the Florence Floozies or something like that. I'm making it up, but there is a group that goes pretty wild. And then, of course, a lot of marching bands, and then crazy, the stuff that you could never predict. So in one of the pictures, the Shriners have built a ramp over a car, and they're driving go-karts over the top of the car and down the other side. Well, I hadn't seen that before. I don't think many other people had. So a lot of it is a mixture of location, mentally, okay, in this place I've got 3 or 4 spots that I'm going to be standing, and then waiting to see what happens. So it's a sort of combined anticipation, the unexpected with the planned. And then, like I say, you know, I have to wait another year. If I don't get much or mess it up or whatever, then that parade's only going to happen, you know, the following year at roughly the same time.
So to wrap this all up, my question to you is, when someone walks in and views these 3 series of work, what was something you'd like them to take away from looking at this exhibit?
I think I would probably be pleased if they thought that they were enlightened about their own community, that there was more, let's call it beauty, to be found in their community. Because again, going back to the point I made early on, you know, especially photographers, you know, you think most people, when they ask you, I was asked this morning by somebody, what sort of things do you photo? Is it landscape? Or, you know, that's immediately where people go if they think you're a, quote, serious photographer, because it's got to be beautiful. Well, I'm trying to make beautiful pictures out of the everyday and expand that definition and understanding of beauty. So if people walked out and said, you know, I didn't know that the railway track could be made beautiful, and I've got to take a closer look at that, or whatever it is, a building, then that would please me. That would be one thing. And, you know, not to take things for granted would be another. That there's more in your humble local community than you might expect. As I said a lot of times, I mean, you know, there's a very famous project made in the 1920s by a Hungarian photographer who was living in Paris, called Paris by Night. Well, of course, he had Paris to work with. And so I thought when I started this that it would be interesting to kind of riff off of Brassai's Paris by
Yes.
Night. And if I still lived in Edinburgh, you know, then it would be a lot of good historic material to work with. So I think in certain situations you're handed more to start with, and others you've got to work hard at. And that's hopefully what I've been doing, is working hard at it.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in today and talking about your work. I'm very happy to have this work in our gallery right now. If you'd like to check out this exhibit, you can check it out on our website, online, at yorkcountyarts.org, or you can make an appointment with us. Thank you.